Hey, everybody. I'm interrupting this podcast episode to tell you about the Listening Lab because registration is open and I don't want you to miss it. I've been working on this for months and I'm so excited that it's going to be happening live on July 2nd at noon Eastern. And I want you to come so that you can learn one of my favorite tools, the 3L method. Because you know that moment when you've asked your kids to put on their shoes or do their homework or do a chore and they look at you like you've just asked them to solve some quantum mechanics problem? Yeah, that's the moment we're going to be looking at and examining. That moment where you're thinking, oh, cool, I've become invisible. Awesome. Love that for me. My kids do not listen. I want to just pause for a moment and let you know that in moments like that, typically your kid's brain is on airplane mode. Not kidding. When they become dysregulated, their nervous system goes into this mode where it says, nope, we're closed for business. Try again later. And even though you might have a perfectly reasonable request, it's going to bounce off them like throwing a marshmallow against a brick wall. So I'm going to teach you the 3L method. It's a method I created for myself 10 plus years ago. And we're going to spend 90 minutes learning the theory and the application. You're going to discover exactly how to get through to your kids when their brains have gone full Fort Knox, full lockdown. I'm going to teach you this tool and how you can listen and be present with your kids. When I teach parents this, they'll literally message me saying, oh my gosh, my kids just listened to me. I didn't lose my mind. I haven't yelled all day. So I want to teach this to you as well, because we really do have two choices. We're at this crossroads. We're hitting almost the middle of summer. And you might be thinking, okay, this is going to be a good summer. We're going to turn things around, or I want to get things even better. I want to do something new. We can keep playing the ask over and over and over game and lose our cool and feel like we're needing to use consequences and punishments and rewards to get our kids to do anything. Or we can use the 3L method. You can sign up for the Listening Lab. You can make an investment that's less than a fancy cup of coffee from Starbucks and learn how to use a 3L method to connect with your kids, to get them to want to listen to you, to set limits from a really good place, even when they're melting down. All you have to do is go to cmp.works/listen, and I'll put that in the show notes to make it super easy for you to register. You can come live, which I highly recommend. But if you can't come live, I get that too. We're busy. The replay is going to be there for you whenever you are able to listen to it, because honestly, life's too short to spend it trying to get our kids to listen, especially when it feels like no matter what we do, they don't hear and we end up feeling frustrated. All right. So hope to see you all at Listening Lab. Until then, enjoy today's podcast. No one can learn a lesson when our emotions are high. When our emotions are high, our intelligence is low. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Welcome to today's call, everybody. We're going to dive into sibling rivalry or fighting and what to do when the kids aren't getting along either with each other or just they're not really getting along with themselves. And this is something, especially the sibling rivalry, that I get asked to break down all of the time. So we're going to devote a whole episode to this. I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. First, setting the foundation of what needs to be in place to create a relationship that leads to our children caring. As parents, we get worried sometimes when our kids are acting in a way that doesn't feel very caring or kind or empathetic or generous, and we're worried, which makes sense. So we're going to talk about the foundation that needs to be in place to create a relationship with our children that leads our children to caring. Second, we're going to talk about how to handle the conflict, the competition, the contention, and the heat of the moment, so that you know what to do practically. And then third, what to do after the conflict is over to hopefully set yourself and your children up for more success in the future. So the foundation. This is the foundation that leads to caring. It's super important. And the first thing I want to talk about is what we can do as parents to draw out feelings of sadness so that we decrease their aggression, because it's them feeling their emotions that allows them to transform that emotion so that it can be used as fuel for emotional growth instead of emotional assault. The question I would ask myself first is, are their feelings moving? Are they having tears, which could be figuratively or literally? As they get older, they're less likely to just burst into tears, although they might. But are they having sadness or tears, which is figuratively representing them surrendering and feeling the emotions consciously versus fighting the emotions and staying stuck in the frustration, which causes that attacking energy? And I'm going to use attacking as the word primarily to describe that outward expression of when they might be yelling or kicking or hitting or whatever they're doing. That's more of a reaction to the emotion. We all do it. So there's no shame in it, but it's less productive, but it also tells us a very clear story. What we want them to go into, and ourselves too, all of this can be applied to us as well, is it's the soft tears of sadness that resolve the emotion. It's the space and safety to be able to express our emotions and for our children to be able to express their emotions that we want to see happening. Okay, that's what our goal is. And it's really interesting. My sister was over yesterday and she was talking about how her daughter, who is, I think, around 10, often has these night bursts of tears. And I know from personal experience and having that in different forms with my own kids that this can be really draining for us if our kids are having big emotional outbursts. She was describing it. And I get it. I understand. Oftentimes we spin this to be a negative thing or something we're ready for them to get over. And rightly, because it can be really draining on us. It can be really triggering for us. But this is such good news. They have recently moved new schools, new situations. So I get some of the frustration that can happen, some of the emotions that can come up when we're, as adults or children, put into new scenarios, new situations. And the fact that she was crying, this is actually a really good sign because her emotions are moving. They're not stuck. They're coming out. And sure, it can feel really annoying or triggering or frustrating as a parent dealing with these big emotions all the time. But the fact that she's crying it out, this is actually really good news. And just tell me more. Why is it good news? I need some new thoughts to think about her nightly outbursts. It's draining. So changing our perspective can make what might feel draining or heavy or even unproductive. But what if we change that thought to, oh my gosh, this is actually a sign of emotional health? Because emotional expression is a sign of emotional health. Even if it's draining, emotions are moving. And this is different than a sustained emotional attack, which isn't a result of us feeling the emotions, but instead reacting to the emotion. Here's the bottom line. If you can't change the frustrating situation, we need to have our tears or our sadness or our surrendering about it. And just last night, I was talking to my husband about something before we went to bed, and it was something that's really challenging for me. In the past, would have tried to suppress it or justify it or try to talk myself out of it. But instead, I just let myself cry for a few minutes about it. It wasn't super long. Let the tears come out, those soft tears of sadness, and it helped the emotions move through and do their job. I didn't have to stay stuck in the emotion. Previously would have, because I would have felt maybe the crying wouldn't be helpful, or maybe that was indulgent. And instead, I just accepted what I was feeling, felt the emotions and moved through those, which other times when I've avoided the emotion or I've tried to make myself feel bad for feeling that emotion. Like, you shouldn't feel this sad. This isn't that big of a deal. That person didn't mean to say that or whatever the situation was. And then it stays stuck in us instead of having a moment to feel that sadness and that surrender, that futility to stop fighting the feelings I'm feeling and just let that emotion move through. So it might look like a cry, or oftentimes it just looks like me sitting with the emotions and acknowledging it. So when we are talking about our kids, they need to do the same thing. And it's our opportunity and privilege to be able to help them draw out these feelings of sadness, which decrease the aggression. So if your kids have been fighting a lot, and maybe you're thinking, I can't even leave them alone for 2 seconds because they don't get along. If that's a thought you're having, I want you to start thinking about it through the lens of connection and attachment and development. And truly, if there is an aggression problem, we can't leave them alone. And that might be hard because our brains know we need to fix the aggression problem right now, but this is a long-term investment. And to be able to acknowledge and validate it's okay that they're having an aggression problem right now, that they're maybe lashing out at their siblings, or they're feeling really upset about something that's happening at school and they just can't quite let that move through. And realizing, hey, this is going to resolve. I just need to give it time. And for right now, because they can't control or regulate themselves, I can't leave them alone. And to be able to sit with that. And I want you to sit with that. And I want you to think about what that brings up for you. If that's something that's hard for you to wrap your brain around or to accept that you might not be able to leave them alone right now, you might have to be closely attentive when they're around or get really creative on how to help create an environment that's safe. We want to get intentional and proactive as we think about how to solve these problems and solve these kinds of situations. I had a mom once say, I can't even go to the bathroom without leaving them alone. Her kids were really small. And at the time, that was the truth. She couldn't leave them alone. She couldn't expect her 5-year-old to have the emotional control to not get frustrated with the baby. And so that was true. And you might have to take one of the kids with you if you go to the bathroom or if you have to go into the kitchen or whatever, and might need to separate them to make sure they're both busy doing something. And that might just be where you're at right now. But no, that's not where you're going to be forever. And as you allow them to grow up and to try to do your best to grow up in a situation where they're allowed to be safe and to feel these emotions, and for you to do what you need to do right now to allow them to not have more frustration that keeps building. It matters what lens we're seeing through. It matters if we're seeing our kids' behavior as information that's informing us of what's going on inside of them or information that's defining them. And when we get upset with our kids, the defenses come up. And I've done this and I've seen it in real life over and over again. And if we say something like, what's the matter with you? Or you shouldn't act like this, or you promised you wouldn't do this anymore, their defenses come up. I want you to think about what that would be like if somebody said that to you. You don't necessarily even mean to, but the defenses come up and you feel like you have to protect yourself. When our defenses come up, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. The nervous system kicks in and goes into fight or flight mode, and we stay stuck in the emotions because our body is so busy protecting us and defending us. It doesn't have the resources or the safety or the space to feel the emotions. So we stay stuck in them and we're unable to work through them. For example, let's say this has happened to many of the moms I've worked with. They have a new baby that comes home, and the older child, when this new baby comes home, and you could insert a move, something that shifts the environment, shifts the situation, something changes. And so they get frustrated. In this situation, a new baby comes home and they get frustrated and they're not able to articulate that because they're young, but they start pinching or screaming at their sibling. Or some of my kids' favorite things were accidentally dropping toys on their baby sister. Or one time I put the baby in a carrier on the ground and somebody pushed the carrier over. Nothing life-threatening, but there was some frustration. And our natural instinct as mothers and fathers is to go over and try to draw out the empathy in the aggressive child. Maybe say to our child, tell your sister you're sorry, or that wasn't very nice, a very nice thing for you to do, or why are you hitting your brother? Or how would you feel if someone hit you? Instead of coming over and seeing through the lens of connection and compassion and realizing that the aggression does not mean that the child is rude or unkind, but instead means that he's struggling with a lot of frustration. And when we see through this lens, then you can come and say something like, oops, looks like your hits got away from you. I know you're dealing with a lot, or I can tell you might be feeling frustrated. And we talk about the behavior, or we talk about how we believe in them. And we don't want to say much more than that, because anything more than that can bring up the defenses again. If we come with compassion, then we are going to have a better chance of being able to take care of the child who's hurt, protecting them, giving them a big hug, separating them if it's in the case of two kids fighting, but also taking care of the child who has all that frustration, who is attacking the other child, by maybe, as we're hugging the one child, looking over and saying, I know you didn't mean to, and believing in them, believing in their goodness and in the best in themselves. And when we allow this, we allow our child to feel the remorse. When we get upset at our child, we take away their ability to feel remorse because, like I said, the defenses come up, the nervous system goes into protection mode, and they won't be able to feel remorse or sadness because they are going to be so preoccupied with defending themselves, blaming someone else or blaming themselves, depending on their temperament. That's not going to help them feel empathy. All of these prevent them from being able to feel the sadness inside of themselves. And this causes them to harden up inside instead of soften up inside. And I've talked to so many parents, and I feel this myself when I'm exhausted because I've asked what feels like 100 times and no one's listening, or the behavior is just not stopping. Sometimes as I'm teaching this connective approach, I'm like so much work and time. And moms will say, I don't have time or energy for this. This is going to be so hard. But what really takes so much time and is so exhausting is to keep asking over and over again and not really having the change. But when we're not giving our child space to feel their frustration and to work through the emotions, the fighting happens again and again. We're not making progress or headway, even though what I'm talking about might feel like a lot of work of creating these connections or taking time to see through this different lens and taking the initiative. In the long run, this will work so much better. Plus, the strategic byproduct of showing up is this warm, deep relationship, our child feeling safe, having fun, being connected, having clarity. So back to the question, I was talking about how when people are feeling like they've asked hundreds of times, no one's listening, the behavior is not stopping, to jerk myself out of it. And what has really helped the other parents I've worked with is to ask ourselves the question, is it working? Is it working? And if the answer is no, then we want to try something else. And the beautiful thing about coming from connection is that there's so many amazing byproducts of it. And it is a long-term investment, but one of the things that happens is the prefrontal cortex grows and allows us to have the ability to hold mixed feelings or mixed emotions. Remember, we've talked about the 50-50, how we have positive emotions and we have what we've labeled negative emotions. We have the happy, sad contrast. And when our prefrontal cortex grows, our ability to hold them simultaneously without being controlled by one or the other, but intentionally, willfully living, making the decision of what we want in our life, it grows exponentially. And this is the essence of emotional intelligence, emotional development. So part of me feels like hitting and part of me doesn't. The prefrontal cortex development is what is required to be able to hold those conflicting feelings. Part of me wants to tell her how awful she is, but part of me knows that's no way to treat, someone else. So having these mixed feelings equals emotional regulation. It's the mix of them, having both, that allows the tempering of them. So another way to think of it is that tears really drain the emotions. So the prefrontal cortex development, it starts at around 7 years of age. I want to put a disclaimer that if you have a sensitive or intense child, one that's been through trauma, or maybe for no reason that you can obviously see right now, sometimes this shift can happen between 9 and 12, and we call it the 9 to 12 year shift, or even later. And there is typically also a dip in the ability to feel the mixed emotions in the teen years as the emotions of puberty, the hormones of puberty kick in. It happens to us adults too. Sometimes we dip. Sometimes we're not capable of showing up at our highest self and using all that amazing prefrontal cortex magic that allows us to hold the conflicting emotions. Sometimes one emotion gets away from us and we're just really angry and we just let it drive us for a little bit. It's totally normal. So this mixed emotional capacity looks like being able to hold, I want to hurt, but I don't want to offend at the same time, or I want to hit, but I don't want to hit. And until they get this, they need supervision. This ability to hold the mixed emotions, it's going to come. As parents, one of the best ways we can help facilitate this shift is to allow their brain to rest, because a brain at rest grows. It's just like our body at rest. We sleep at night. That's when your body's recovering from an illness or growing. Same with our brain. But what does the brain at rest mean? It means that they feel safe, that they're not having to use their energy to defend themselves, that they're not in fight or flight mode all of the time. And this is a process we're ebbing and flowing through constantly, but we're trying our best to help them feel safe, secure, and certain when they're around us. And if they're not, we're looking at how can we help that? How can we facilitate that? Because if their brain is preoccupied with defending, which can come out as the behavior that looks like attacking, and if that's the primary way that we see them presenting themselves, then they're not feeling safe and they're not at rest. And the prefrontal cortex isn't able to continue to grow and evolve because the body is so preoccupied in fight or flight mode. So having them feel safe, and just what we were talking about, when we come and there's a problem, we're coming with compassion and empathy. We're not trying to change the situation in that moment. We're just, how do we help them feel safe? How do we make sure everyone in the situation is safe? And how do we believe in their best? So that's one way. Another way to help the brain rest is to have them feel very connected and attached to you as their primary caregiver, as their parent, but also other important people in their lives, to have those strong relationships where they know that no matter what, no matter how they act, no matter how bad they are, that you are going to be on their team, on their side. And this is an ongoing process. We are intentionally creating this for our children. because things can throw it off all the time. A bad test at school, if that's important to them, an unkind word that a friend said, us even accidentally having a little bit of a harsh voice as we ask them to do something could get their brain off kilter and feeling a little bit unsafe. So we see evidence of that when they come home and they start offloading their feelings, or they have a breakdown and we ask them to wash the countertop. Oh, I just triggered them by the way I said it. And the best thing we can do is to let them offload their feelings, emotional expression without repercussion, reminding ourselves that all emotions are totally normal and that this is a really good sign they're moving through their emotions. So we stay as neutral as possible. We try ourselves not to get triggered. The things that can help us do that is having conversations like this, that we have new context, but also doing our daily thought downloads, doing our steers. Those are so helpful to inspect with curiosity what's happening in our brain. And why do I have those triggers? So we can bring it to the consciousness. So we want to stay as neutral and as not triggered as possible so that we can create safety, we can create connection. And as a result of a safe place for them to feel their emotions, they might have those tears or the surrender and the futility and go from mad to sad or surrendering, so they can return to a state of equilibrium, and emotional growth happens as a result of them coming back to that state. So that is really fundamental. It's the laying the foundation, helping their bodies know they're safe, helping us show up in a way that creates the safety and the free expression of whatever is happening for them in their life. So that's critical and foundational for everything else to happen. If we haven't laid that foundation, strengthened the relationship, done our best, and this is a process, so just be patient with yourself, but done your best to try to continue to reinterpret maybe the old ways you've been thinking about the fighting specifically, or just any off-track behavior they have. Us doing that work is going to make all of the other things we do with them so much easier and better. So let's talk about what we can do in the middle of the conflict. And this is where most parents want me to jump right into, but what we just talked about is necessary to understand before we can move into handling the conflict with our kids in a healthy, safe way. So when there's conflict, especially between the kids, the first thing I recommend is engaging in what I like to call do no harm parenting. The only goal is to make sure everyone is safe in the moment, not the time to make headway or teach a lesson. The best thing we can do is to not say anything or do anything that we end up regretting. We're not going to attack their character, which means we aren't going to use words like you're mean or selfish. We're going to remember no one can learn a lesson when our emotions are high. When our emotions are high, our intelligence is low. So we're not going to try to teach a lesson. We're just trying to keep everybody safe. And we don't want to attempt to control the child. So instead, we want to take charge or try to control the situation. So not control the child, try to control the situation, which just means if we walk into the room and the kids are fighting, we're going to control the situation, so to speak, or take charge of the situation by separating the kids or using distraction. We can redirect them. Ideally, we want to separate them before the conflict begins. So if we can hear an inkling, or even if sometimes your kids will wake up and you'll be, oh, she's a little on edge today. I can tell she's a little extra frustrated. So you might be more aware or observant of things that might go down quickly. So just be aware. It's always best if we can help before they start fighting. Let's give a little scenario. Let's say that you can tell they're bickering, or there's just a little bit of discord. This is when you want to say, okay, I'm going to step in. I'm going to be the alpha parent. I'm going to take charge. And I'm going to look at this situation and see what I can do to help take charge of the situation. And you might actually separate the kids, give them something to do. I want you might say to one child to go over there, and I set up the drawing stuff for you to draw, or Play-Doh or whatever it is. And I want you to come help me cook. And you might give everybody little stations to go be occupied with, and not in a frustrated way, not in you guys are fighting, so you can't handle being by each other. So you got to go over there and you got to know. We're just very proactively coming in and we're like, oh, hey, I have this plan. You're going to go do that. You're going to do that. You're going to with me, if you know that they really can't handle each other. And if they can't handle being in another room, you're separating them in your room where you need to be and trying to figure out a way to keep them occupied as much as possible, but not in a frustrated way, in a state of mind with service and compassion, staying neutral, looking through the lens of connection and relationship and attachment. And this can take a little bit of thought to have the different spaces. You might think my home is too small or I have a lot of kids, but I promise if you take a little bit of time, it's possible. If they're having trouble playing together, or maybe the only way they can play together is if you're right there with them, then set up times when they're playing in their own spaces. So say you're making dinner and you can't play right there with them. You're like, I got to go play dinner. You can have, okay, you're going to play with these toys over there. I want you to take your puzzle and do it over there. And I'm going to have you do this over here, trying to set them up for success. Or if you have big kids like me right now who aren't really playing, but they are doing things, We can have different areas where they can do their homework. We can step in and take charge of the situation by reading it and saying, okay, what's happening here? And not making it a negative thing. Or every time they come home from school, it turns into a battle, or every evening between 5 and 6, it turns into a battle. Trying to think about routines and structure. So I homeschooled for 10 years, and routines and structure seriously saved me. Everything was planned out. Now, I'm not saying that I was hovering, making sure they were doing certain activities at certain times, but there were blocks of time. This is our time we're going to be outside. This is our time where we're drawing pictures. And this is our time where we're reading a book. And this is our time where we're having snacks. Think about how you might be able to structure your day and give lots of space for free time and discovery. You're not micromanaging their time, but having it be structured in a way, and even asking them, hey, what do you want to do after school? If you feel like they just have so much time on their hands and you don't want them just on the TV or with the games, what could we do? What could be really fun? And slotting out that time and trying to be present on the things you want to be present with so that they have a flow to their day. It can promote safety and bonding. The routines can do that if we put them in place, and kids do thrive on structure. So if you feel like your kids are driving you crazy, fighting, I want you to think for a minute about how hard for you interpersonal relationships can be as an adult. Maybe it's hard for you to deal with certain people in your life, maybe your in-laws, maybe your neighbor. Who is it? There's probably someone that is more challenging. This is real for us too. And we have those people in our life that are hard to be around. Our kids, they get to live with their siblings day in, day out. Maybe they're sharing a room with them. They're sharing a home with them. They're with them a lot. So it's normal to have just some tricky interpersonal relationships. Sometimes I forget, you guys should just all get along. And sometimes it's hard for me to get along with other people too. So just giving them that space. Okay, this is one a lot of you all have asked me about. It's a good question. It's fighting in the car. A lot of you have written to me about this. I've had questions about it. I want to address it to everybody so we can all have the same information. And this can feel really tricky because when you're driving, you literally cannot be physically present with them. You can pull off to the side of the road, which I totally recommend if you feel like you're not in a safe place to drive because you're feeling so triggered. But we can also get really intentional and proactive to help decrease the tension and attacking when we're all in the car together. So one solution is to simply not let the kids who aren't getting along sit by each other. And when my kids were little, especially, this was a problem. I had 6 kids in 8 years. We had an 8-seater car. So if all of us were in the car, every seat was full. So there wasn't the logistical opportunity to be able to separate everyone. They were going to be sitting by somebody, but I would be strategic. I would change it up as needed, but I'd have seat assignments. And so I knew the kids that were a little more prone to go at each other, they were separated. So just think about that. How can you make it fun? It became a rotation. It became really fun. It became something, it wasn't a negative consequence. Like you guys can't sit by each other, the thing. Also, distraction is so powerful in the car. Remember, we can't command maturity. We wish we could. We wish we could just lay it down and be like, guys, I need you to grow up. I need you to buckle up. I need you to be kind, but we can't. So while we're waiting for our children to mature more, or maybe they are just having a rough day, so their maturity is dipped that day, which happens to all of us, thinking about ways when we're in the car, if we're going on a long road trip. Normally they're totally fine, but maybe you have big kids and the long road trip really is hard for a couple of kids or all of your kids. So some of the ideas that have worked really well for me and other people that I've worked with is games, having car games. We used to do the license plate game. If we're going on a road trip, we'd try to spot license plates from other parts of the country. We've done the alphabet game, which is where you're trying to spot different letters of the alphabet on signs outside of the car. We had music. We've had dance parties in our seats. We had specific car toys when my kids were little, toys that we kept in the car that were only allowed to be played in the car. This was really helpful. It worked really well. We also often, almost always, were listening to a book when my kids were younger, but I had some kids that loved the books and some kids that were like, I hate listening to books. So they would have their toys, or they would bring in art stuff that they could color. So there's options, but I love listening to books, especially when we're all together. And I personally like them better than movies, but movies can be a great distraction too. Books are less stimulating. Sometimes movies can be super stimulating, which tended to get their emotions even riled up even more. So just be mindful of that and see what works for your kids. I already said car toys, so a basket of things that we're only using the cars, and car snacks. If we were running lots of errands, if I knew it was a long day, we'd have food. I'm just throwing these things out for you to come up with your own ideas of, okay, if fighting in the car is a problem, how can I intentionally take charge of the situation, take charge of it? It starts by how we're believing and thinking about the situation itself and our kids' behavior and our capacity. So we want to take time to prepare. Another tricky time is witching hour, is what I like to call it, between 4 and 5. And one of my best strategies for that was to have special toys that could only be played with during that time of day. So a 4 to 5 box of toys was super helpful. Proactively thinking, this is a hard time of day. I'm tired, or they're tired, or we're just tend to be a little bit on each other. What can you do proactively to help take charge of that situation and decrease the conflict that's happening? Dinner time is also another time where we want to have this connection with our kids, but sometimes if they're tired, it's late, or they don't like what we cooked or whatever, or they just don't like sitting by each other. So if they don't like sitting by each other, physical separation, again, having a seating chart, using distractions. We would play, would you rather eat slugs or swim in a pool full of snakes? They have those books with unlimited questions of would you rather, you can Google it, or table questions or conversation starters. Those were super helpful. We had a deck of those we would use. We often did what we called sweet and sour, what's the best thing of the day and the sour thing of the day. I heard another mom called it rose, thorn, feather. So the rose was the thing they liked. The thorn was the thing they didn't like. And the feather was something that tickled them or something they were excited about. And I thought that was a really fun thing to add in there. Another idea is to have a conversation about something that's important to one of the kids. I do a little research, have an opinion about it, and then have a conversation. They really appreciated me being interested in what they were interested in. So thinking about some of those times that are more tricky and how can I proactively take charge of the situation to help prevent the conflict instead of even having to react to it. This is so good for us to think that through. Sometimes though, we're going to need to set a limit on the behavior, and that's okay. But like I said before, don't use any character identifying labels, mean, rude, unkind. Keep the words focused on the behavior. I can't let you do that, or no hitting. And do your best to communicate that when the behavior is not okay, that the relationship is okay. We're always trying to reassure, can't do this behavior, but the relationship is good. Behavior's not okay, relationships is okay. Or this behavior is unacceptable, but you're acceptable. And remember that this is not a path of perfection, always about coming back and connecting and remembering that the relationship is always bigger than the incident. So even if you mess up and you say to your child, you're so rude or whatever, say sorry, make it up, remind them that you're there for them, strengthen the relationship. In the heat of the moment, don't try to get details, especially if the kids are fighting. If your kids are fighting in the room and you come into the room, don't try to get details of the story in the incident. You'll never win. You want to come in as the alpha parent and take charge of that situation. And you might say something like, looks like we're having a problem. And then take the iPad away or whatever, take the toy away, separate the kids. The worst thing you can do is to keep asking them to stop the thing. You don't want to ask anything of a child that's out of control. And remember, asking once, fine, we can ask. Hopefully you've come in, you've looked at them in their eyes, you've done the C part, eyes, smile, nod, you've connected, establishing that working relationship before you've asked. Sometimes we forget. We have old habits die hard. So we ask once. If we ask twice and they don't respond, that is our indication. Be ding, ding, I've missed something. I need to evaluate this a little bit more. We want to stop asking over and over again, because that's usually an indication that they're out of control. They're not able to bring it back in. They need us to do that for them. And when emotions and behavior are out of control, I want you to assume that they're not able to control themselves. Broken thinking, not able to control themselves. Brains offline, thinking's offline. So you come in as that alpha parent, kind, compassionate alpha parent, and just say, if the issue was the iPad, they were fighting over the iPad, just say, oh, no more iPad, just take it away. And if your child, that's not fair. Why did you do that? We don't need to be accountable to our children for our decisions, especially if we're doing this work and we're coming with compassion and empathy and we're really believing in their best. The way we're coming is going to be we're going to feel so good. We're going to feel so abundant. We're going to feel so much love and compassion for them. We don't need to defend ourselves. We don't need to make them wrong. We can just respond by, yeah, it might not be fair. I can understand this is hard for you. Different people have different needs. I'm taking care of both of you. I really have your best interest in heart. I love you. Bridge back to something you're going to do later. I can't wait till we play Legos as soon as I'm done with this task I'm doing, whatever it is. Coming in and being okay if they say, oh, it's not fair. That's all right. That's probably going to happen. Now, after the fact, strategies for outside of the incident, after the conflict, I want you to think about how important timing is. Make sure that they are back in their prefrontal cortex and not in their limbic system, not in their fight or flight. That might take 24 hours. That might take 2 days. Just wait patiently until you can tell they're not agitated anymore. I also recommend that you do it when you're one-to-one, not in front of the other kids, when you can tell they're ready. And then this is when you can tell it's okay to draw out some of that sadness. Because in the moment, you're just do no harm. and it was attacking you, were just there to protect them. And maybe you were able to sit with them and stay with them and they were able to move the emotions, or maybe you just had to separate them, distract them, move into something else. You weren't able to allow all of those emotions to come up. So if that's the case, you can revisit it later, but remember, not to teach a lesson, but to see if you can move those frustrated emotions out. In the moment, your nervous system kicks in. Like, have you ever been in a car accident? I've been in a car accident. One was my fault, one was not my fault. But both cases, they were just fender benders. And in both cases, my defenses went up. I had little kids with me both times. And I remember just dealing with it. But after the fact, later that night, I was able to relax and finally feel my emotions because I wasn't in survival mode anymore. I was able to actually settle down and move those through. Over a decade ago, I had this crazy situation where my 3-year-old went missing and I was out of control. I was so worried. And I was running around the house and looking and screaming. And we lived on 3.5 acres at the time. And there was irrigation ditches in front of our house. I was just so worried. I was so worried that something terrible had happened. I was calling my husband. I was about to call the police when I looked in my master bedroom one more time and I found him sleeping under the curtains in my master bedroom. And I remember finding him and I could feel like this emotional state shift a bit. Not a huge relief, but the franticness settled a little bit. I called everybody and let them know he was safe. And then once I had let everybody know he was safe and I knew he was safe, I just broke down crying. All the emotions of relief and joy and worry and frustration, everything came out. It was all this big mess. And I thought I was all over it until my husband came that night and I cried some more and I released some more because I had some more in there. So it wasn't in the moment when I was in the worry of it, when our kids are fighting and yelling, that's when they're in the middle of that conflict. That's when I was in the middle of looking for my 3-year-old in the middle of the car accident. But after the fact, I was able to do it. So plan to revisit when first connection is in place, emotions have settled down and they feel safe. And there's a couple different ways to do this. You might just touch it barely, drawing out the sadness by saying something like, just to see how it is. Oh, I know that was hard yesterday when John took your toy. And that might be all you say. And you might just see what happens and see if it releases some of the vulnerability, or it might not be a problem. They might be totally over it. They might have some emotions to release, or they might be really defended and be really angry still. And you're just going to touch base and see where they're at. This is after the fact, 24 hours, usually plus one-on-one connections in place. Emotions are settled down. They feel safe. You might let them rant and complain about it. So maybe you touch it. I know that was hard for you. And they just go off on how hard it was and how mean he is. And you give them lots of space to rant, complain. You're not going to lecture or let them know anything they did wrong. Think about it. If you ever start sharing something that's really challenging for you with someone and they try to fix it or say, you should look at their perspective, that there is a place and a time to look at someone else's perspective and to hold those conflicting emotions. But if emotions are still stuck inside of us and we want them to move through, this is not the time to help them see the other person's point of view. They just want to be heard. But you also don't want to collude with them either and be like, I know, they're so real. I can't believe your brother did that. He's such a mess. No, you just are listening. You're a sounding board. You're a safety. You're a container of safety where they can just be their messy selves. You might do all of these things together. You might do one and then the other, depending on the age and the situation. You could also try drawing out the mixed feelings and be able to see if they're able to hold the conflicting feelings and emotions. So you might say, I know that was hard yesterday when John took your toy. And maybe they then start ranting about it. Oh my gosh, I know it was so mean. I'm so upset about it. And then you might just see, I know part of you is so mad and part of you understand whatever the scenario is. I know part of you was so mad and part of you didn't want to hurt her. I know part of you didn't feel like completing that homework assignment and part of you did. Part of you was so mad that John took the toy. Part of you knows he's only 2 and he didn't know better. And see if they can go there or if they're like, no, I don't see it at all. You're just trying to see where are they? And if they're the 5 to 7 year age or 7 to 9, if it's a little bit later, you're starting to see, are they able to do that or are they not? It's not a problem if they can't. You're just, ooh, can they not? If they can hold the conflicting emotions, if they've gotten all the emotions out, or it seems like they've gotten most of them out, you can solicit a good intention. Again, this is not done in the incident. So in the heat of the moment, you don't want to be saying, can I count on you to not do this ever again? I've done this. So this is not the most beneficial way, but you don't want to do that in the moment. It's something you're going to do after the moment. What you want to do is draw out those mixed emotions. Part of you is upset that they touched your Legos and part of you understand that they're so little that they didn't mean to destroy your Lego set. And if they can go there with you, if you can say part of you didn't want to hurt them and part of you did, or part of you is mad and part of you understands and they can go there, then you can now take it to soliciting a good intentions. But if they say, oh, yes, I did want to hurt them, or I don't understand why they got out, then they're not ready to talk about it right now. So you wouldn't want to go to this next step. But if you say, I know your sister is really driving you crazy, and they say, oh, did you notice that too? then you can start to see where it's going to go. I know part of you thinks she's driving you crazy and part of you understands it. And one of my favorite things, and this probably comes from me just having the tendency to feel a lot of shame and self-blame, I always help them know it's totally developmentally normal. You're totally fine. This is not a problem. So then I might say something like, yeah, I used to bug my sisters too, if it was something that was around a sister driving you crazy. So in this scenario, we'll jump scenarios here. I know your sister was driving you crazy, and they'll say, did you notice that? Because I could have said, I know you were bothering your sister. You could isolate her to call out their negative behavior, but instead just, hey, I can tell that you're frustrated. Not that I can tell you're frustrated because you're picking on your sister and being mean and unkind. No, I can tell this is really hard. Your sister is driving you crazy. Then they aren't going to feel defended. They might say something like, oh, you noticed that too. And then you could say something that allows them to feel like sometimes that happens to you. Yeah, my sisters used to drive me crazy too. Or sometimes I get frustrated like that too, not with my sister anymore, but with traffic when it's really bad or something. And this is taking the shame out of it and reassuring them that nothing is wrong with them. And then you can keep talking about how they might want to act the next time it happens. But if your child doesn't want to stop hitting, then you want to abort this. They have to have the will for this. So you want to keep building the relationship, keep doing no harm, and waiting for them to have the emotional maturity to be able to step into this. But let's say you had the conversation while you're walking the dog, you're one-on-one, 24 hours past the event, and you discover that they really do have this desire to not hit anymore, or to not get mad, or to not be so frustrated. Then you could ask, how does that feel in your body right now? Or how does it feel in your body right before you hit your sister, or right before you got angry at your brother for touching your Legos? They might not know at all. They might be completely oblivious. A lot of humans, adults even, we're so out of sync with our emotions. So they might not know, but I want you to just ask it and just think of yourself like a coach or a trainer, and see if you can come alongside and come up with a plan for next time. So next time you want to hit your sister, instead of hitting your sister, you could hit the pillow, or you could call me. I'm here to help you. You can just say, Mom, I'm feeling that way. I feel like I'm going to hit, or I feel like I'm going to yell, and I'll come help you. So giving them steps to put in place so that they can have options. Understand that in the heat of the moment, they still might lose all the intention. So don't hold them to it, but you're starting to set them up and giving their brain ideas and starting to pave the possibility of it. So you're aiming them in the right direction. If you're breaking up the conflict between two kids, instead say something like, yep, that hurt and I'm here to help. And once this happened with two of my kids, I gave the one that had just been yelled at a big hug. And then I looked over to the other one and I said, I know you didn't mean to. And she said, yeah, I didn't mean to. And so you can be there for both of them. You're not like making a victim and a villain, not taking sides. You're just saying, I'm here for both of you. You believe that the child who was attacking was doing their best and there's foul frustration there. And you want to look into that and help them. And you also know the one that just got yelled at is feeling sad and you want to help them and acknowledge that too. Yes, it takes a lot of work, but a lot less energy than living in conflict. And these are all predicated on having a strong relationship. So the relationship has to be worked out first. So matchmaking is building a relationship between two people, but you're doing the work. I'll give an example. So we were out getting a Blizzard at Dairy Queen, and one of my kids said, oh, we want to make sure we get one for my sister. And it was really beautiful. When we got home, I gave it to the sister. I said, she really wanted to make sure we got this for you. When we can help them see how much they care for each other is a powerful way to help that relationship grow. Another example was my oldest daughter was off to college, which right now is only about 20 minutes from her house, which is really beautiful. And my younger children are often talking about how much they miss her and they wish she was coming over. Me saying something to her and letting her know how much her younger siblings miss her is a form of matchmaking, building that relationship. I'm not trying to control or manipulate, just communicating the truth of, oh, this is what they think about you. I don't know if you know this. This is what they really believe. Then it helps strengthen a relationship. It could make a relationship that's struggling stronger. It could make one that's strong, even stronger. It makes us feel loved and wanted when we know other people around us love and want us. I heard a mom sharing an example of matchmaking. They had a Sunday game night, and her older child had gotten old enough that she wasn't mandatorily requiring him to come to the family game night. And the younger kids were saying, oh, we miss him so much. When none of the other kids were around, she said something to the older child and said, your younger siblings just have said the last couple of Sundays how much they miss you. And remember, this isn't to try to guilt trip him into coming. And he was, are you serious? Really? And then when some of the younger kids came in, he felt so much love and connection to them that he gave them the biggest hug. Matchmaking looks like saying comments like, she just loved so much when you posted that happy birthday for her on Instagram. Don't say it in front of the other child that did the thing. Say it in the context of, hey, just passing this on. A couple other things really quick before we wrap up, drawing out the hierarchy, leaning into this idea of older kids wanting to take care of younger kids. It's a natural instinct. This happened a lot in my older child when he was first going to school. He went to a Montessori school and they have multi-aged classrooms. And it was always amazing for me to go in and see how they were eliciting this caretaking instinct inside of the older kids to take care of the younger kids, and how much peace and harmony there was. So sometimes we can use that older sibling, younger sibling caretaking instinct to help decrease the contention and be like, could you help take your younger brother to the park or help them with this food or whatever? We've talked about imposing rituals and order. So continuing to do that. Scripting is something I want to touch about really quickly before we wrap this up. If your kids aren't old enough to cooperate, or even if they are old enough, but it's a new setting, you can help them know what to do. You can't script a child, first of all, if they're not attached to you. And you want to do this prior to the conflict or emotions being heightened. Scripting is just walking them through it. Here's what we're going to do first, and here's what we're going to do next. And you're going to get a bite, and then I'm going to give you a bite, and then I'm going to give you a bite. We were on vacation and we were sitting eating dinner together, and we just bought one dessert, and we were like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to each take a bite and share something about the trip. And we went around multiple times. So we were scripting that experience. But you can script anything. The kids sitting down and playing with toys, for example. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to put these toys in the middle, and you're going to play with these toys, and you're going to play with these toys, and you're helping them walk through it. My challenge for you this week is to be thinking about the conflicts that are happening. What can I do ahead of time? What can I do differently in the moment based on what we talked about? And what can I do after the fact to prepare to have more success next time? We'll talk to you guys later. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great week. We'll see you next week. Bye. Thanks so much for listening, you all. If you are ready to learn more about Connect Method Parenting, if you've been listening to the podcast and you think, ooh, I'd love to be able to implement this in my life and with my parenting more, then check out Pivot. It's my 8-week program where we deep dive into learning and implementing Connect Method Parenting so that you can take this information and transform your parenting journey. Head over to connectmethodparenting.com to find out when the next group starts.